this devil, this rascal, and I don't know who it is I could be talking about here, whether it's David Samson or Billy Corben, but Billy Corben decided to do a little documentary satire and political activism and mini documentary by using social media and his platform to recruit David Samson to say terrible things about this Mel Reese deal. And together, the two of them made a little bit of art and made a stir. Billy Corben is the reaction has been interesting. You've been moved by the reaction.
It's been a wild week. I mean, we certainly hoped to educate the people of Miami on these shady deals that are happening behind closed doors, bring them out into the light, have government be transparent and accountable. But the reaction this week has been something else. I mean, we are through the looking glass. White is black and black is white. David Samson and I agree on something. Greg Cody and I agree on something. I'm still trying to process what has gone on here.
Well, Whittingham, I want to side with you on this because
sports welfare queens.
Whittingham, it doesn't feel like he's in a fair fight here, fighting you as a team employee or someone who gets paychecks. But I do want to take his side on behalf of my selfish needs and the needs of sports fans here in South Florida.
The only pushback we've gotten on this is from Twitter accounts with dudes with 50 followers and football jerseys in their profile pic.
Those would be called my customers,
okay.
And that is why. That is why you will back away. You said
I admire the self-awareness.
Yeah, he said it. He said it by way of insult, and I'm like, no, back off, fancy political man. You're getting near my money now.
As Jim Lampley once said,
yes.
that is my daily bread.
Yes. This did not dawn on Billy that yes, those people arguing with his avatars.
You resemble that remark?
Those are the soccer zealots and the people who feed us well. And David Samson, you got his voice. Because David Samson got over on our city, and I don't know how this partnership came together. You guys are rivals, but you also are spirited adversaries. And so, how did this thing happen?
When Clarice Starling went after Buffalo Bill, she went to Hannibal Lecter for help, and that's exactly what I did. These words have never come out of my mouth, but Greg Cody said it best. We got the ultimate expert witness on the stand. There's a finite number of people who have achieved the level of success that Samson has in professional sports in a major league baseball franchise, who has come out of those back rooms, who has been in the back room, in the rooms where it happens, who is willing to come out and talk about how that sausage is made. And so, I mean, who better to? I mean, the city of Miami has spent over $3 million on outside counsel and consultants to help them negotiate this deal, the biggest real estate deal in the history of Miami. And I say hire David Samson. Who knows better how to help municipalities and governments navigate these waters and how the other side plays the game than this guy?
So, David, why did you do this?
So Billy called me and said he had an idea that the result of which could be to help educate people in Miami about what's going on with the Mel Reese real estate deal, because they're calling it a soccer deal and they're comparing it to the baseball deal. So I wanted to be a part of it for purely selfish reasons, because I'm so tired of the misinformation about Marlins Park and people not fully understanding how it was done, where the financing came from, and the fact that it was only a baseball deal, that Jeffrey Loria owned no real estate around Marlins Park, nothing in Little Havana. He just wanted a ballpark. But what Jorge Mas wants has nothing to do. It's almost immaterial that there's going to be a soccer stadium. So to call it a soccer deal is not relevant. That's like the loss leader for this big real estate transaction. And Billy's brilliant as a filmmaker, and we thought that people would pay attention to this mini doc. But you're not supposed to admit this, but I will admit that when Billy and I were talking about the release of this, when we looked at the final product for the first time, I was laughing because it was so good and so funny. But we said, I don't know what kind of audience this will have. And it's obviously struck a nerve. And the reason it struck a nerve is Billy's talent and my voice as sort of conduit.
And your resume. It's your voice, but your resume. So explain to people why this is a bad deal, why you both know it's a bad deal.
So let me just give you two quick things to focus on when you're dealing with politicians. you are preying on them, and the reason you can take advantage of them is that you understand that their object here is to make sure that David Beckham in Major League Soccer is in Miami because they want professional sports in Miami. They believe that Miami's a baseball town. Query, is it? They believe it's a soccer town. Query, is it? And therefore, you are willing to bend over backwards. You're willing to bend over for Beckham in order to get this done. And it started with the first press conference when David Beckham was introduced and everyone was fawning over him. And it made me smile to think about the advantage that Beckham would have. And he's taking full advantage of it, so I don't blame him, nor do I blame Jorge. But the fact is,
not
when
full
you are
advantage.
getting,
It's taken him a long time. Like, people keep waiting for this to deliver the dividend.
It took 15 years, Dan, to get a ballpark done. Wayne Huizenga tried to get a ballpark in Miami in 97, and it opened in 2012.
Yeah, and Inter Miami have been trying forever at numerous places. Well, I remember the first idea was them to build a stadium on the port.
Port Miami, yeah.
Then there was another one to build it right next to American Airlines Arena. Then there was the Overtown idea, which they still own that property in Overtown.
Yeah.
If they want to build the stadium,
They might have to.
Right. And then now this is Plan D.
Well,
is the Mel Reese site.
Here's the thing. In a weird way, I kind of feel bad for David Beckham, who's a minority owner of this organization, but of course, whose deal with Major League Baseball allowed them to
Major League Soccer.
Major League Soccer. I'm sorry, a Freudian slip. Allowed them to get a sweetheart deal on a franchise down here as part of his contract as a player. But what you have to, this guy just wants to play the beautiful game. I believe that he is sincere and heartfelt about he just wants to bring soccer to Miami. But the funny thing is that when Jorge Mas got involved, he said, no. We don't just need the four corners of a piece of property to build a stadium and some parking lots. I'm going to call the mayor. I'm going to throw my weight around here as an oligarch and get something happen, because I reported this on the show before. They were offered private property for almost $1 a year, a sweetheart deal on private property mere miles away from the current location at Mel Reese, and they turned it down because that private property owner was going to get the benefit of the additional development in and around that property because they owned that property. This is not about a soccer stadium. This is about a shopping mall. This is about an office park. This is about retail and all this other shit that has nothing to do with soccer. And more importantly, that Jorge Mas has absolutely no experience as a developer creating these developments. So what is he going to do? He's going to sublease it out. He's going to license it out. Why shouldn't the city get the benefit of bidding those things out instead of Jorge Mas? And here's the bottom line. I want to make this clear. And this is something that, by the way, I think to admit, David Samson has convinced me that it's nothing personal. David Samson has convinced me that I have nothing against Jorge Mas and David Beckham. I'm a private business owner. I understand that it is their responsibility to negotiate the best possible deal for their side, for their team, for their investors, for their partners and co-owners.
And this would be that. This is a sweetheart deal for Beckham and Moss and his associates.
My beef on Mel Reese, my beef on Marlins Park is who's on the other side representing us. Who are these elected officials and the city manager and the city attorney who are supposed to be negotiating on our behalf and representing our best interests in this deal? Here's the bottom line. You wouldn't trust your kid. You wouldn't trust these commissioners to babysit your kid for 2 hours. How can you trust them to negotiate the biggest real estate deal in Miami history?
Billy, there's one thing you got wrong on that. And Beckham,
just one?
His goal was not Miami. Right? So he was looking at all sorts of different cities. His contract called for him to get ownership of a Major League Soccer team at a $25 million valuation. And while expansion fees were $150 million. So he was getting profit immediately because he was getting a team for $25 million. Right. When Miami is what Major League Soccer wanted. All the way back before Marlins Park was done, the city of Miami wanted Major League Soccer where the Orange Bowl was, not baseball. They wanted a soccer stadium. But Major League Soccer, they couldn't get a deal done fast enough. Then David Beckham comes to Miami, and he's got one investor, that guy, Clore, remember him?
Maurice, yeah.
Guess what? He put money in. All that money got spent. They were dying for money. Then Jorge Mas tries to buy the Marlins. Jorge Mas didn't have the money to buy the Marlins. He was told by Commissioner Rob Manfred and me that he won the bidding over Jeter. He's got the team. Now you have to pay for it. And he then bowed out. But he was so embarrassed by that, he then pivoted and said, all right, I'm now going to put money into soccer. At the same time, They needed money. They had no cash at all. So they were looking for investors and no one was stepping up. Jorge Mas agreed to step up on one condition. A, I'm going to be very front-facing because I need to have a legacy play here in Miami. But B, when we do a deal in Miami, it's not just going to be a stadium deal. It's got to be a real estate development deal so I can run among the real estate people in Miami. So this has always been just about real estate for Mas, and it's always been about profit for Beckham. And if this deal doesn't happen, guess what? The team will be out of Miami and Beckham will still have his interest in a team that plays elsewhere.
We will get to more of the details in a second on the specifics of this deal and where it is that Whittingham and you guys might separate. But as it relates to Mas, you're making his money feel a bit counterfeit. He bid on the team and he didn't have the money to buy the Marlins. You're saying the embarrassment of that. He got you used Jorge Mas to drive up the price with Jeter, and Jorge Mas sat next to Jeffrey Loria at an All-Star game, and he didn't have the money to buy the team. That's what you're telling us flatly.
It's just a fact. I mean, I'm telling you how the negotiation went. I didn't tell Jeter that at the time. Jeter thought, he went to bed one night thinking that Mas was getting the team. And then he woke up when Mas pulled out. Mas called me and the commissioner to say that he could not close, that he didn't have the liquidity. And that doesn't mean Mas is a bad man. He's not. It doesn't mean he's not rich because he is. It required a level of liquidity at that moment that he did not have. Believe me, that is not a negative against Jorge Mas, who's a hugely successful businessman. So please don't spin it that way. But at that moment in 2017, he could not close, but he wanted to have a presence in Miami, and he wanted the Steve Ballmer effect, right? He wanted to be known. And then he pivoted to become David Beckham's partner. Do you remember how quickly that pivot was?
It was fast. A lot of people have compared Mel Reese favorably to, or unfavorably to, the Marlins Park deal. And it is a bit like comparing apples to orange bowls. I think, this is where I think where David and I agree is that the Marlins Park was a very good deal for the Marlins. I think where we disagree is whether or not it was a good deal for the taxpayers of the city of Miami. I think most people disagree with him on that point. However, I think that the Mel Reese deal is a lateral kind of bad. It's not a direct comparison. The public subsidies are coming in a different way. They're coming from criminally discounted lease, and perhaps their ability to indefinitely delay the payment of that money on this 99-year no bid, below market value lease on the city's single largest piece of contiguous property, 131 acres of prime real estate. And I also, so there's another kind of misconception I want to dispel here, is that I'm trying to protect or save a golf course. Let me be perfectly clear. The only sport I like less than soccer is golf. I don't give a shit about, this is not soccer, this is sport versus sport to me. This is about the taxpayers and their public property and whether or not we can trust the people who are supposedly negotiating, or supposedly, as we say in Miami, negotiating this deal on behalf of the taxpayers. That is my concern. If there is a better deal to be made with Inter-Fort Lauderdale, then let's have it. Let's see it. But we're not seeing that. Francis Suarez told us in January that this deal was good to go. It was fully negotiated, time to come for a vote. And the lawyers who said, wait a second, we got a memo here with 28 issues outstanding, and they delayed the vote by four times.
All you're arguing on behalf of is, in the most expensive real estate market in America right now, make sure that land gets maximum worth from whoever it is that gets to have that land.
It was my same position on the Marlins.
Can I frame this for you? When John Henry had to leave Miami because he promised a stadium and then he just had to get out of Miami and buy the Red Sox, Major League Baseball and Bud Selig wanted any local businessman in Miami to buy the Marlins. Jeffrey Lurie was last on the list. Anybody local could have stepped up and bought the Marlins in 2002 for $158.5 million, and nobody stepped up. Does that make it a good deal or a bad deal? Fast forward. The real estate deal now at Mel Reese. How many real estate developers would take the exact same terms and also build a soccer stadium, but take the exact same terms and do that deal? They're lining up to do it.
They would pay, but they would
That's
pay
how you
more.
know whether there's a good deal or a bad deal.
Yeah, they would pay more. 4 years ago, we had people standing up at public comment at a public commission, at a city commission meeting saying, I'll pay you $10 million. I'll pay you $17 million. George Perez, arguably, Stephen Ross's partner and related group, arguably the most successful real estate developer in the history of Miami. He sent an email from Italy in 2018 during the commission meeting to say, this is a terrible deal, an objectively terrible deal. And that was in 2018. And in the last year alone, rents have risen in Miami by 60%, but not for the billionaire. We have to subsidize a billionaire's rent in one of the poorest cities in the country. We have to privatize profits and socialize losses.
The only thing that, and I completely agree with the notion of wanting more from our elected leaders. However, there was a referendum. The referendum was approved. The no bid is gone. It's gone. It's been approved already by the voters. It's only about, at this point, negotiating the terms of the deal. And I looked up the referendum language just to make sure. Shall Miami's charter be amended to negotiate a 99-year lease, waiving bidding, converting Melreese Country Club at no cost to the city to soccer stadium, minimum 1 million square feet office, retail, commercial uses, minimum 750 hotel rooms, living wage for on-site employees, $3.577 million in annual rent, $20 million for public park. So this is all in the language. The voters of the city of Miami knew what they were voting for. The no bid is a goner. It's not about putting it up for bid because the voters already gave it away. The voters. You say, who's negotiating on behalf of the taxpayer? The taxpayer. They already voted for this.
That's actually not true, and it's not true for several
that's not
reasons.
true, Chris.
What do you mean it's not true? Like the waiving for no bid has already been voting on. And now, okay, so $3.577 million in annual rent is up for, it's a minimum. It's up for negotiation. Now, if you want to say, City of Miami elected leaders, jack that up to whatever dollar amount you think is correct, you can. But
that's just for starters.
Agreed. But the no bid thing, it was in the language.
What he's saying, what are you finding objectionable? If Whittingham is saying, both of you are saying, of course, the fairest thing is to throw it into a free market to see what the maximum bid would be. But Whittingham is saying this was already put up for vote, and the voters, the few though they were, the voters voted, whether they're representative or not, because they are few, they voted to not have a bid go up. Where is Whittingham wrong on this?
He's right that happened, but what all that really means, and those referendums are worded in a way, and they're wordsmithed completely to mislead everybody and to get your desired result. But the reality is that the politicians and the people who are negotiating against Moss can take that referendum language and they can say, listen, you're right, we can only negotiate with you right now, but only until there's a bypass and an impasse, and we want $20 million a year in rent, and we want you to do all the environmental cleanup, and we want you to do the public infrastructure, and we're still going by the letter of the referendum, and so we're not in violation of anything. And Moss would say, no way, that's not a good enough deal, that is not a good enough profit margin for me, so I'm not going to do it. So you can get by a referendum very, very easily.
But I don't understand, where's the impasse between a negotiation and this is the worst deal?
The deal is not, there's a reason the deal is not done yet. It's because the voters didn't decide. It's because they need to count to 4. They need 4 out of 5 commissioners to vote on this deal. And what the referendum allowed them to do was to negotiate this deal and bypass.
Correct, which they're doing.
The bidding provision. But they're not, but I want them to do it better, and I want them to do it more equitably on behalf of the taxpayers. Do we even know what
the final terms are?
Well, Francis Suarez said back in January, late January, early February, that they were done, that they were ready to come to a vote, and they've delayed that vote now 4 times and counting.
I just don't understand.
And the reason you delay it is that you don't have the vote. So we only went to a commission. Remember how many times we delayed it? It's because I couldn't count to 9. And the minute I could count to 9, we called a commission meeting, and that's it. And you have to live through a full day of Carlos Jimenez yapping about how negative he is, and everybody else, and Katie Sorensen, who was a dear friend, saying, this is terrible, I'm a no. But it didn't matter because we had the 9 votes. You had to open it to public comment. It doesn't matter. We had the 9 votes. The fact that this has been delayed is the reason they don't have the 4th vote, which is why this mini doc that Billy did can actually be so impactful, because there's nothing Billy tried to do with Marlins Park that was going to work, because I knew that I had the votes, and Billy could MF me all he want. He could make fun of me. He could sully me, whatever he wanted. I didn't care because we had the 9th vote. In the soccer situation now, this video is making an impact, and query, will there even be a fourth vote now? And that's something, Billy, did you even imagine that could happen?
I hoped, but I don't know that I imagined it. I mean, let's look at the facts. There's 3 yeses on the dais. Joe Carollo, Christine King, Alex Diaz-Portilla. Everybody who was elected or reelected in the 4 years since this scheme first arose in 2018, the Mel Reese incarnation of MLS here, everyone elected and reelected has been bought and paid for by the Moss Group. I mean, you should see. Look at Alex Diaz-Portilla. He was basically elected on the cash from Jorge Moss.
Let me slow you down before you get revving here and become this fire hose, just so the people understand what you're saying on where this vote is. And one of the reasons I think that Billy is so excited and should be so excited about a documentary thing that he has done with Samson that has gotten people's attention. I give it the flattering praise of a documentary thing.
I don't need your praise. I got Greg Cody's praise.
You got Greg Cody has supported
that's
you.
it. The cows have come home. Pigs are flying. It's over.
In the Miami Herald, Billy has a wind of support. Foghorn Billy, a fire hose of outrage at every turn, has a lot of wind at his back. He has made a piece of art here with David Samson that has resonated. And 3 of the commissioners that Billy Corben has just mentioned here are the foulest of our commissioners. When he says they're bought and paid for, like, you cannot have these people in charge of things.
I mean, there's bagmen. I mean, there's literally money changing hands.
But these 3 people, so that we know who are bought and paid for, are
Commissioner Como Mierda, Joe Carollo, who was arrested for domestic abuse for striking his wife in the face with a terracotta-colored T-box back when he was mayor in 2000, because here in Miami we don't recycle our trash, we re-elect it. Alex Diaz-Portilla, part of the Diaz-Portilla political dynasty. He and his brothers have been feeding at the public trough and victimizing our community for generations. This is a man who said, who in a libelous and defamatory statement, told CBS Miami this week that I make my living via libel and defamation. Particularly funny about that is just last year, Alex Diaz-Portilla was sued for libel and defamation by a former wrongfully terminated city code enforcement officer who claims that he manhandled her at an illegal after-hours COVID curfew violating club with no liquor license in Allapattah. And so I think the lesson of the Trump era is that every accusation is a confession. Speaking of which,
these are 2 of the commissioners.
But I very quickly want to read what I think you were trying to paraphrase Greg Cody when he's referring to me in his column this week. He says the 2-minute teaser video comes from Billy Corben, the Miami filmmaker, professional curmudgeon, and champion of the people who agree with him, a role both self-appointed and voraciously held. Again, every accusation is a confession. Every accusation is a confession. The third...
David loves that line.
That is a great insult. Let me read that again. Let me read that again, Billy, because it's such a great insult.
I hope they put that on your tombstone.
Give me the 3rd commissioner
Give
there.
the people what they want, Dan. Read it again.
Give me the history as I fumble for my glasses. Give me the 3rd commissioner's history.
The 3rd is recently elected Commissioner Christine King, who is an acolyte of the Hardiman crime family, and she was the anointed successor to Keon Hardiman, pay-to-play Keon Hardiman, one of the most corrupt commissioners in the history of Miami, who is now advanced to being one of the most corrupt commissioners in Miami-Dade County. He now helps to oversee a $9+ billion budget where he and his family are now shaking down his bagwoman Aunt Barbara and his bagman uncles Roy and Billy Hardiman are shaking people down, vendors and contractors down at the airport, because that's where the money is. Ever since the Wheel of Fortune days of Alex Pinellas, the mayor of Miami-Dade, who set up all of his cronies and his benefactors with sweetheart lifetime contracts at the airport. The airport has been the economic lifeblood and the public trough of corruption in this community. And Christine King is a shoo-in. She was elected in no small part with Moss money. And they thought they had Ken Russell in the bag, but he's the swing vote. Ken Russell has reverted to his default mode, which is fear, paralyzing fear. Because Ken Russell, not unlike Miami Mayor Ponzi Postalita, Francis Suarez, he's checked out of Miami. He's got his eye on his next gig, on his political future. But here's what I want to tell him, and I want to warn him. Google Carlos Alvarez. Carlos Alvarez was the mayor of Miami-Dade County who was recalled in no small part for helping to champion the Marlins Park deal in Miami-Dade County during a recession, and he was recalled as county mayor. And I will tell you that nobody who voted in favor of the Marlins Park deal, none of the elected officials ever achieved higher office beyond that. It's been a political albatross for them, and it became their glass ceiling. And I guarantee Ken Russell, if he votes for this thing, Mel Reese will be the same albatross for him. He might be able to run for yokel office here and there, but he will never achieve higher office again. Look at Carlos Jimenez, a man that I've come on this show and criticized repeatedly. Carlos Jimenez, who David Samson just complained about. Carlos Jimenez was able to parlay his opposition to Marlins Park into Carlos Alvarez's job after he was recalled as county mayor and ultimately to the United States Congress. So I would warn Ken Russell that this will have the same effect on him.
3 of the commissioners are bought, David, is what Billy Corben is saying. Billy Corben, the 2-minute teaser video comes from Billy Corben, the Miami filmmaker, professional curmudgeon, and champion of the people who agree with him, a role both self-appointed and voraciously held.
Hot meat kettle.
It's such a Shakespearean twist of the pen here in this feud between Greg Cody.
Greg Cody, who went to high school with Shakespeare, I understand.
David, what do you make of everything that Billy just said?
I think that he's got one thing right, which is public financing is a very complicated issue. And there are elected officials who lose jobs over it, but it's also happening all over the country. Billy and I were asked to recreate the magic already in 3 different areas around this country, to do some sort of video documentary to explain to voters what's happening with the Buffalo Bills getting $1.6 billion, with the Baltimore Orioles getting $1.2 billion, with the Oakland A's trying to get money from either Vegas or Oakland. So this is not unique to
Isn't
Miami.
Tampa at it again?
Tampa's at it again. So just when one thing about Miami is you always thought that you're unique, and you're not. There's the corruption that you say exists in Miami. It's also so many other places. But what you've tapped into here, Billy, is people's fear of ignorance. It used to be ignorance is bliss, and now what's happening is people are actually scared of that ignorance, and you're educating them, and that's why I want to be a part of it.
It's not so much that I think Miami is unique. I do believe that there are unique things that happen only in Miami, but I've always said the Miami of today is the America of tomorrow, and that's why Miami is important. If you want to know what challenges we'll face or calamities will befall us as a nation in the years or even decades to come, you need only look at, as T.D. Allman called us, in Miami City of the future, we are the canary in the coal mine. We are the bellwether.
So the delay that's happening with Ken Russell right now, and the reason why there's been no commission meeting, is that Jorge Mas and his lobbyists are trying to figure out how to get Ken Russell to be a yes. And they're not going to break any laws. They're not going to bribe him, but they got to figure out, do we have to add soccer field somewhere? Do we have to, what do you want that can help make you a yes? And if Ken Russell doesn't come up with a list of demands, then there's nothing Mas can do. If he comes up with a list of demands, then Mas has to decide if they are worth it and if he can pay for those demands and not hurt the economics of his deal. And that's why you're seeing a delay. And in addition, there could be parts of the agreement that are not fully baked in terms of who's paying for overruns on the stadium, for example, or who's paying for the environmental cleanup. That may be, Chris, that has been taken care of in your mind, but I promise you there are about 100 issues like that in an agreement, literally not 28, 100 issues minimum, where it is a true cost to one side or the other, and that has to be fully negotiated before the private sector will agree to sign.
And Ken Russell is between an arsenic-infected rock and a hard place right now, because if he does come to some quid pro quo with Jorge Mas and Beckham and the ownership group of Inter Miami, that's what he's going to pay politically, a very deep and heavy price for that.
But is there not a point that Ken Russell can negotiate to, which is what you want, where this becomes a good deal?
With all due respect to Ken Russell, he's a surfboard salesman and a yo-yo professional, like national yo-yo champion. What I'm saying is a contract is only good as the good faith negotiation between the parties and said parties' willingness to enforce that contract.
But you said yourself they've paid $3 million in legal counsel. Like, they have people who are negotiating on their behalf.
But they're not listening to them. That's the whole point. That's
all for cover, Chris. That's all for cover.
And who's paying them? You know who gets those contracts, by the way? You want me to get into this? One of the people who got into that is David Samson's BFF, Mark Sarnoff, one of the deciding votes in the City of Miami Commission on the Marlins Park boondoggle. Okay, Mark Sarnoff. Let me tell you, he used to be the commissioner in Ken Russell's district. And his wife, in fact, ran against Ken Russell before she dropped out of the race.
Hold on, Samson, why are you shaking your head on Sarnoff? What is happening here?
Mark Sarnoff is not my best friend by any stretch. Mark Sarnoff was among the most difficult people to deal with because he had this inflated sense of not just importance, but he thought that he had us over a barrel, and he had it wrong the whole time. And so he had to,
Did you get his vote, David?
No, wait. Look, now you've gotten us deep into the weeds. Corben,
Done.
you've gotten us deep into the weeds here, and now we're going to have to keep digging on here. And now I'm going to have to get to the bottom of this goddamn Sarnoff. Give me the story of this commissioner.
Ooh, can of worms.
That you guys have allowed me an opening here to talk about this. What happened? How did this person do their job poorly in a way that they thought they had a hand on you, and you were able to outmaneuver them because Sarnoff was a fool?
Are you talking to me?
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, I thought you were talking to Billy. No. Hey, your strings are high up, but my voice isn't squeaky.
Okay, so there's a good story here to be told.
Listen.
Maybe another documentary someday, Dan.
I don't want to lose the focus of what we're here for. We're here because what Billy has been trying to do for decades is now about to work, and he's trying to come to grips with that fact.
I can't come to grips with that. The running gag on this show, David, is that nothing I do works. That's the running gag on this show.
Well, this is
that I'm a successful documentarian and a failed activist. That's the shtick, dude.
He is. That's right. He fights good, winning fights and always loses them. That's the whole Billy.
That's the bit, dude.
That's the wrestling.
Well,
character.
You finally called me, Billy.
Yes.
You finally got me on your side.
Yes.
But here,
now we can start winning.
The point I was making about Sarnoff was not a Marlin's point. It was a Mel Reese point to explain to you how this actually works. So Mark Sarnoff, back when MLS thought that Ken Russell was in the bag for them because they bought him off with the Baywalk, and they've made a lot of contributions to his various pet projects. His pet projects being Ken Russell, by the way.
Wait, Samson can't keep shaking his head on Sarnoff and not expect me to bite on that every time. I want to hear about this goddamn
Mark Sarnoff. Of all the commissioners I've ever dealt with in my life, Mark Sarnoff was unique in that he was the most conniving. The majority of commissioners will be very forthright with you and say, hey, what am I getting? I need this. Can you get it for me? And so it's open. Mark Sarnoff went about it the other way, where it had to be a guessing game. And he loved the power that he felt he had over us, where he kept us guessing about how to get his yes vote, like what we'd have to do to make the deal better, what we'd have to do to help people in his district, what we'd have to do to help him in a re-election, or whatever we'd have to do. And it was like a guessing game. And when I realized that, I then stopped making offers to him. I stopped negotiating with him. He held up commission meetings. I'm laughing because we were ready to go to a vote in the city, and he was at war with the mayor at the time, Manny Diaz. He was at war with his fellow commissioners, and he held up an entire meeting because he thought that he'd have a big scrum around him. And he did. So the meeting was canceled. There's a big scrum around him, and he and his sort of movie star looks, he was loving the moment. And that's when I realized that's all he actually wanted. He wanted his moment. And so we gave him 3. We gave him an opportunity to meet with media 3 separate times where he was the star guy, and we ended up getting the vote. I'm laughing because it took me longer with him to figure out how to beat him than it did with anybody else.
Let me give you a very brief background on Mark Sarnoff, which is that we don't know who Mark Sarnoff is. You know, I have my favorite saying that LA is where you go when you want to be somebody, New York is where you go when you are somebody, and Miami is where you go when you want to be somebody else. It's always been a sunny place for shady people. And how people like him have thrived in local government and business is beyond me, because this is a man who's lied about who he is, who his family is, and where he's come from. What do I mean by that? Many years ago, while he was a sitting commissioner, the Today Show was celebrating some 40th anniversary or 50th anniversary or 60th anniversary or something. And on the air, they discussed the founder of NBC, David Sarnoff, a pioneer in RCA radio and the guy who was responsible for the existence of NBC. And so people in the city who saw that, because David Sarnoff's name is not often talked about, but he's an important figure in the history of broadcasting in this country, people started asking Mark Sarnoff, hey, are you any relation? It's an uncommon name, any relation to David Sarnoff? And he quietly told people, yes, he is my grandfather, but I don't talk about that very much. That's not fucking true. He is not David Sarnoff's grandson. We have no idea who the hell this guy is, but he served as a very significant force particularly in development. When you look at downtown Miami and you look at Brickell, okay, and what a mess they are with one of the greatest urban planning tragedies in the history of this country, where they just allowed unfettered development for decades with no master plan, with no sense of infrastructure, green space, the fact that you had developers who were selling Bayviews who then developed a building blocking those same Bayviews that they just pre-sold to other buyers. It was a total debacle. And this guy was very, very responsible for a lot of that. And this guy, several years ago when Ken Russell was running for re-election, remember, this is a vote that MLS thought that they had in the bag. He was a guaranteed, at that time, he was a guaranteed yes. So they needed to re-elect, they needed to elect new commissioners who were going to join Ken Russell into this 4-vote majority for the Mel Reese boondoggle. And so what happened is that Mark Sarnoff quietly started to dip his toe into the race. He started to do polling. He started to start a whispering campaign like the Muppets Take Manhattan and Sardi's that he's circling the race and he might challenge Ken Russell for his old seat. Here's the thing. I don't think he was really interested in doing that. What he was interested in is the power that he could gain from not running for that seat. And what happened is Francis Suarez went to Mark Sarnoff's law firm and said, you guys will never get business with the city of Miami again if Mark Sarnoff challenges my guaranteed yes vote, my puppet Ken Russell on the city commission. And so what did Mark Sarnoff do? He didn't run. And guess what happened just a few short months later? His law firm got a contract to help negotiate the Mel Reese deal on behalf of the city of Miami. The deciding vote on the Marlins Park deal got a contract as outside counsel where he has racked up, I think at this point, probably nearly $1 million alone in fees just to that one law firm. Okay. That's how Miami works, man. It's the wire.
Samson,
that's how it works.
Samson, from inside the machine, I don't know that I've ever seen it that deep inside the machine. Like you guys, it may be matter of fact to you guys, but good God, that's gross.
You have no idea. That's not even that gross. I mean, that's a surface level cut. That's all that is. What he just described with who gets hired and who gets paid to be a lobbyist and how it works with who's running, who's not running, that is a surface level. I don't even need a Band-Aid cut.
When I called David to talk about the possibility of doing this mini documentary together, I asked him first straight away before I told him this idea. I said, have you been following Mel Reese? He says, yes, obviously I have more than a hobbyist interest in this. And I said, so if you were to go on your podcast, Nothing Personal, tomorrow and talk about this, what would you say? He'd say, essentially, we're in the home stretch and what is happening now behind closed doors would make people like Billy Corben very uncomfortable. And I was like, okay, this is the part where they put in the sausage process where they put the rat's feet in and, all the other things you don't want to hear about and know about. And that's when I sort of sprung this on him, this collab, if you will.
I will say that you and Samson have now shown to this audience of our customers, the people in the jerseys who are yelling at you about all of your politics, but the people who also care about sports in this market. Thank you for allowing us a look inside of the machine. David, his Nothing Personal podcast, I will remind you every time I get a chance, I believe that he's a good deal better than Darren Ravel or anybody talking about sports business out there, and he's got range beyond that. So Nothing Personal is the podcast. Thank you, David. We appreciate your maiden voyage here on Because Miami.
See ya.
Shabbat Shalom.
Billy, one of the things that I wanted to close out with you on is a little bit of a history lesson with Whittingham, because I was telling him earlier this week about Henry Flagler and just the way that the original train stations was just built to make all of this marshy swampland exist into Key West. And he was, no one else was interested, but Whittingham,
Sounds about right.
Whittingham was deeply interested about like, what have the last, how did Florida, how did Miami, how did 100 years go by where this marshland became something that you realize that we're building atop the Everglades, and we're building and have been building historically into Key West for 100 years through land that's not really meant to be lived on.
Well, like much of this country, and something we're not allowed to talk about in public schools anymore, is we have to thank Bahamians and African Americans and the people of color who actually built this city, one of whom is one of the few American cities with a founder of color on the original charter of the city of Miami. But like everything else in the country, when they were looking to tame the West, it was any Western you've ever seen is always about the railroad mavens, right? It's all about extending the railroad and getting the property to build the railroad. And where were all the towns built? As close to railroad stations as you possibly could. That's where development took place. Any transit corridor. And the organic transit corridors coal powered train were water, right? So in a peninsula like Florida, this is why when buildings are developed here, they find indigenous graveyards and extraordinary artifacts of ancient civilizations and Native Americans here who lived here long before the Spanish and long before any of us. And where do they find it? They find it right on the bay. They find it right at the mouth of the Miami River, right in Brickell, right? Because that's where people lived. You lived where you could eat and where you could transport yourself with bodies of water. Then came the railroad, and then actually even more important than that was the mid-1950s, was the advent of central air conditioning and DDT to kill the skeeters. Because Miami, much of South Florida was not habitable year-round. Unless you were like a redneck or a native or someone who could whose thick skin could stand, because the most dangerous thing in the swamp are the skeeters. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's more so than alligators or pythons. Well, there was no pythons back then. But I remember someone wrote, this is in Michael Grunwald's amazing book, The Swamp. They talked about how after the West was won, that the greatest thing that the Army Corps of Engineers of this country could achieve is to tame the wilds of the swamp, is to find a way to drain the swamp and make it habitable. And over time they did. And not only were they able to drain the swamp, and the story of Florida real estate is all lies that came true. It was people selling swampland, including Charles Ponzi, for $20 down, $20 a month. Own your lot of land for the Florida dream. Come down and retire and build your dream house on what was uninhabitable swampland.
So we're built atop a literal Ponzi scheme?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the state of Florida was the last place in the country where Charles Ponzi plied his trade whose name we would forever attribute it with it. He was in Jacksonville and Tampa before he got extradited to
Whittingham. You are right to roar with laughter at the comedic perfection of. So we're matter-of-factly built atop the original by-name Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, Charles Ponzi himself plied his trade here, the last place in the country.
But you sound like you're unsurprised by that, because you deliver that as if everyone knows just how at the core corrupt this entire marshland is. From everything to the politics, to the stadium deals, to the real estate deals, as we continue to build atop this flawed infrastructure, we put another Jorge Mas over here, and we stack all these people on top of each other, have no plan for parking, and are just giving away land.
It's a land of milk and honey. I mean, that's what Florida is. What do we sell? We sell the Florida dream. And with the advent of Central AC and DDT in the mid-1950s, making South Florida habitable year-round for human beings, and other than reptiles, still some human reptiles. I'm talking to you, Rick Scott. What happened is that Florida has had, on average, 1,000 new arrivals to the state every single day since the mid-1950s. And what do those people do once they get here? What do? Some of them are retired, right? So they're on fixed incomes. Those people can't afford Florida anymore, unfortunately, the retirees. Some of those people come down and what do they do for work? They do real estate development. They become architects. They work at restaurants. They work in hospitality. They work for Disney World. They work in tourism. They work in hotels. They work in jobs to try to attract tomorrow's 1,000 new arrivals and to sell them the Florida dream. And then Gary Mormino, the historian at the University of Central Florida in Tampa, the Florida of Florida, Tampa is, Professor Mormino says that what happens in 2007? This is the year before the Great Recession, mind you. What happens in 2007? Florida experiences its first ever population net decrease since the mid-1950s, since we've got 357,000 new people every single year. And what happened? The economy collapsed. That's why I say we're the canary in the coal mine. We are the Florida of today is the America of tomorrow. So our economy collapsed a whole year, basically, almost before the Great Recession occurred. That's why people say that we were lighting fires down in Miami and Wall Street was trying to read our smoke signals. You could get a second mortgage. Your dog could get a mortgage on a drive-through at Washington Mutual, for crying out loud.
The Florida scenes in The Big Short are, for me, the wildest ones.
Yeah.
By a million miles. I still, first off, that movie makes my blood boil. But second...
It's a masterpiece.
No, it is. But the Florida scenes where it's like you're the guy goes to the strip club and he's like, oh yeah, I've got 5 mortgages. Yeah. He's like, what?
Yeah, the toxic realtor bros.
Right.
And it
was unbelievable.
The whole subculture. But what happened is, and what Gary Mormino posits is that we are in fact a Ponzi state because the state of Florida economy is a Ponzi scheme. It functions solely on growth and new arrivals. Unsustainable, mind you, because we have limited real estate and limited resources in a peninsula and limited clean water. But when we stopped growing, we were not a self-sustaining economy. We were, in fact, without that new outside investment, a Ponzi scheme.
Okay, uplifting as always, Billy. Thank you. Our
episode
good
title:
fight,
Built atop a Ponzi scheme.
Our good fight continues. We covered all the ground today on stadium stuff, and before we get out of here for the day, because I did think all of that was illuminating. You want the last word here with Whittingham on the stadium and Mel Reese?
I want to say I feel like this podcast was his resignation letter to enter Fort Lauderdale. You didn't put up a good fight, dude. I'm sorry. I mean,
it wasn't a whole lot of windows to get in there, but
I'm sorry. It's all you.
No, but look, I mean, the referendum was approved. The language is there. The will of the people was heard, and now it's up for a negotiation to have happened. And I just don't understand where you're taking such a strong, and look, I understand the characters are there, but we don't know the finished terms of the deal. In the end, this can be a good deal for the city of Miami. And also, I find it deeply unfair that you're saying that this is worse than Marlins Park when there are not tax dollars going to this. Yes, I understand it's a different form of subsidy, but it's not public money that's coming directly out of taxes that a person is paying into someone's pocket. There will be revenue as a result of this project.
Cares?
This will be a net positive, especially compared to the golf course, which is currently a net negative. There'll be many millions more dollars coming to the city of Miami than were before as a result of this deal.
That doesn't make it a good deal. And you ask me why I'm so hostile. It's because negotiations by their nature are adversarial, right? You're supposed to be on opposite sides of the table. My question is, who is on our side of the table? When you look at the Miami Herald editorial board meeting from 2018, where Jorge Mas went to answer their questions, there was only 2 people on his side of the table. There was him and who was sitting shoulder to shoulder with him. Francis Suarez, in a 3-piece suit, scribbling notes on a legal pad as if he was representing who in that negotiation? Jorge Mas, which in fact he is. So that's my question. When you're supposed to be in an adversarial position in a negotiation, you can all come together at the end. That's fine. But who is representing? Who is
Billy Corben is saying there's no chance of this being fair. He's saying it's rigged already. He's saying,
which is why we made the mini doc.
He's saying the deal is done already. The dirty money has all changed hands. That whatever it is that's going to happen is already inevitable. Now it's just about showing it to you. It's not about changing it. It may be changing it if there's not a 4th commissioner who's going to be bought.
Or maybe changing it in that we can make the deal a little bit better, because clearly no one inside this process, this negotiation, is influencing it positively for the people of Miami. So we thought some outside influence might make it better.
Why has it been delayed 4 times?
I don't know.
They don't have the votes.
Right, exactly. But that's because there are people who are currently negotiating, and they have not yet come to terms and an agreement. It is being negotiated.
Francis Suarez said at the end of January, early February, we're just a couple months later, he said, the deal is done. Let's bring it for a vote.
But Billy, you're bringing that up as an argument in your favor when that is, or as an argument to this is corrupt and bad, when the fact that they haven't had a vote yet is a sign that that's a positive outcome for you.
No, just because you have, I understand that point, but just because you have some commissioners, by the way, even the 3 yes votes are still, this is the home stretch. This is what David Samson said, the part of the process that I would like least of all, because this is when they're coming with their pocketbooks open, shaking these guys down. The way deals get done in Miami is not by making the deal better for the residents and the taxpayers of Miami. It's by sweetening the pot for the personal and political profit of the individual commissioners and the mayor. And in the case of Art Noriega, the city manager, which we revealed in the mini doc, he has a shady side deal with Interfort Lauderdale to give him, after he negotiates this deal, ostensibly or supposedly for the people of the city of Miami, he's going to resign as city manager and go join some Mostech or Inter-Miami subsidiary to become their expediter to help, go through the permitting process and the FAA and the county and the remediation process, which, by the way, will indefinitely delay the rent payments, no matter how much they negotiate that rent payment, indefinitely delay it, maybe for a decade, maybe more. So what I'm saying is that just because it's being delayed doesn't mean that we have expert negotiators on our behalf. It means that they're shaking them down.
Look, I'm not misrepresenting anything when I close this out by saying what Billy would like. I'm not speaking for you. You do that fine for yourself. What you would like is the best deal for Miami and a process that is transparent. And you just know, based on history and earned cynicism, that transparency will not be forthcoming. You will keep screaming to get it. You will not get it. No one will care about all these links you're making, and that it'll be business as usual in South Florida, and the trains will keep running, and you will keep screaming at them, but you will keep losing. You're the road runner here. You're the coyote. You're going to keep losing here because you're going to get steamrolled here. The deal is basically done. You just want to keep showing people that it's not right that it's done. That's not what's best for Miami.
In the words of the great Greg Cody, the legendary sports columnist at the Miami Herald, critics of the Freedom Park Initiative have reason to object. And it almost makes you wonder if it has been worth fighting over on the part of Inter-Miami. Cocaine's.